If the person you thought was your salvation suddenly held the power to destroy you, would you still trust them, or would fear win? Welcome. Untamed Hearts. You've returned to Tales by Jenny Moon, a place where the wild waits, where every heartbeat can be hunted, and every touch carries danger. Tonight's story will stir your senses, tempt you with desire, and bind you to alphas, fated mates, and the hunger that never lets go. But remember, every choice has its cost. Mark your presence with the pack. Like, comment, subscribe, share, so the night knows you're here, and the stories know where to find you. Stay close, untamed heart. The night has already chosen you.
The iron gates yawned open with a groan that reverberated through stone walls, spilling torchlight into the vast underground chamber. The black market was alive tonight. A congregation of power, greed, and the musk of wolves packed shoulder to shoulder, their voices a coarse hum of hunger. Smoke curled above their heads, carrying the scent of silver and blood, the kind of stench that never washed off skin. They had gathered not for gold, nor for land, but for a spectacle. Chains scraped against the marble floor. 2 guards dragged him in, a giant of a man, wrists and ankles shackled in silver so thick the metal bit through flesh. His bare chest bore scars like war maps, every line a memory of battles fought and survived. Yet even in bondage, Aedric Vaylor, once the Alpha King of the Northern Realms, walked with a presence that refused to bow. His stride was a soldier's stride, shoulders unbroken, his head unbent. The crowd's growls rose to a fever pitch. Some spat, others jeered, but none could look away. His legend was carved into them all. They had lost brothers to his wars, seen villages crumble at the thunder of his pack. Tonight, they were here not merely to buy him. They were here to revel in the fall of the unbreakable. The auctioneer, a weasel of a man draped in gold chains and wolf fur, stepped forward with a grin slick as oil. His voice cut through the noise, trained to stir frenzy. Behold the beast who defied kingdoms, the alpha of alphas, the one they called Wolf King of the North. Tonight, stripped of his crown, he belongs to the highest bidder. Aedric's eyes swept the room, sharp, silver, glinting like a blade under moonlight. Those who met them flinched, as if struck by invisible claws. His silence was louder than any roar, and for a moment, even the auctioneer faltered under it. Then the bidding began. Gold bars, blood oaths, entire villages promised. Rival alphas shouted over one another, drunk on the chance to claim what had once been untouchable. Their voices rose like a storm, crashing, violent. And then, a voice that did not belong. One silver pouch. It was soft, almost swallowed by the noise. But the hall froze. Silence rippled outward, uneasy, incredulous. Wolves turned, eyes seeking the fool who dared. At the back of the chamber, half hidden in shadow, she stood, Serenya Vale. Small against the sea of bodies, her figure cloaked in rough fabric, the hood pulled low over her face. To most, she was nothing, an outcast Omega, her scent faint, her clothes threadbare. Yet her voice, when it carried again, did not tremble. 1 pouch, she repeated, lifting a worn leather bag in her hand. Coins clinked within, pitiful against the roar of wealth around her. The auctioneer barked a laugh. A pouch? For the Alpha King? Girl, do you mock us? Laughter spread, cruel and thunderous, echoing off the vaulted stone ceiling. Wolves elbowed one another, mocking growls twisting into jokes about the foolish Omega who had lost her way. But Serenya did not lower her hand. Beneath her hood, her eyes fixed on Aedric, steady, unblinking. The auctioneer smirked, prepared to dismiss her, but the old law of the market bound even him. A bid, once placed, stood, no matter how ridiculous, and no alpha, however drunk with power, could rescind it. 1 pouch. Accepted, he sneered, dragging out the words to fuel the laughter. The beast is hers. The guards released Aedric. The chains fell slack, ringing against marble like tolling bells. The sound carried finality, ancient, heavy with consequence. The crowd leaned forward as one, breath caught. An omega buying an alpha was more than absurd. It was heresy. Alphas did not serve omegas. Omegas bent, obeyed, existed only in the shadows of dominance. For centuries, that was law. Aedric stepped free of the chains. He did not stagger, did not breathe raggedly. He simply straightened to his full height, the tension in the hall thickening with every slow rise of his chest. And then he turned to her, the girl who had bought him. She stood unmoving, coins still clutched in her hand, the laughter of the hall beating down on her like a storm. But her chin was high beneath the hood, her stillness a defiance in itself. Aedric crossed the distance with the grace of a predator. His hand shot out, iron hard, seizing her wrist. The room hissed with anticipation. This was it. He would snap her bones like twigs, rip the audacity from her flesh. Instead, his voice thundered, "From this moment, she is mine." The words cracked through the chamber like lightning. Gasps erupted, sharp and disbelieving. Wolves shouted, outrage spilling over in waves. Impossible! Blasphemy! Alphas surged forward, some ready to drag Serenya down where she stood. But the force in Aedric's claim froze them. The air itself seemed to bend under his dominance, even shackled as he was. The Omega hadn't claimed the Alpha. The Alpha had claimed the Omega, and in that claim, he had torn the hierarchy apart. Serenya's breath caught. She hadn't expected to live past this moment. She had thought her last coins might buy a fragment of mercy, a distraction from slaughter, but the chain binding her wrist now was not silver. It was his hand, his words, his claim, and the eyes of the hall burned with fury. In that silence, as torches flickered and the crowd seethed, something ancient stirred between them. Not master and servant, not king and subject, but something the old laws had tried for centuries to bury, something that would not be stopped. For a heartbeat, the hall was frozen. The firelight seemed to falter, the air too thick to breathe. Wolves stared, unblinking, at the fallen Alpha King standing unbound, his hand wrapped around the wrist of a ragged Omega, his voice still echoing through the vaulted stone. "From this moment, she is mine." Then the silence shattered. The chamber erupted like a storm tearing through trees. Alphas roared in outrage, their voices colliding in thunderous waves. Chairs overturned, claws scraped against stone, and the scent of bloodlust thickened in the air. The laughter from before was gone, replaced by fury, disbelief, raw violence. "Impossible!" one Alpha bellowed, his chest heaving, eyes glowing gold. "An Omega cannot hold an Alpha. Tear her apart." Another shoved forward, spittle flying as he snarled, "She mocks us all. Kill her before she pollutes the law." The pack lords closed in like a ring of predators circling prey, and Serenya felt their hunger as sharp as knives against her skin. Her wrist throbbed beneath Aedric's grip, her breath caught between her ribs. She had thought she was already walking toward death when she'd lifted that pouch of coins. But this was something else. Her gaze flicked upward to the man who bound her now, the Alpha King whose chains still hung broken at his feet. His silver-burned wrists dripped blood onto the marble, but his posture remained unbroken, carved from iron. His eyes, storm-bright, swept over the mob, pressing closer, and in them there was no fear, only warning. A growl built in his chest, low, dangerous, like the first tremor before an earthquake. The nearest Alpha sneered, baring his teeth. "Step aside, Valor. That Omega is not yours. She cannot be. You shame yourself clinging to her." Aedric's answer was a blur of violence. Chains clattered as he moved, faster than sight should allow. His hand shot out, seizing the challenger by the throat, slamming him against the marble pillar, with such force the stone cracked. Gasps tore through the crowd as Aedric's silver-burned fingers dug into flesh, and the rival Alpha's snarl choked into a gurgle. "She is mine," Aedric growled, each word coated in dominance so thick the air itself bent beneath it. Challenge it and bleed. The alpha writhed, claws flashing, but Adric's grip did not falter. Even weakened, even wounded, he was still the wolf who had broken armies. With a final, ruthless twist, he hurled the man across the hall. The rival crashed into a table, splintering wood, silence crashing down in his wake. The chamber recoiled. No one moved. No one spoke. The law of wolves was clear. To claim an omega was ordinary. To protect one was tolerated. But to protect her like this, to defy alphas before the council's market, was heresy. And yet no one stepped forward to face him again. Serenya's heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't expected survival. She hadn't expected his hand to protect instead of destroy. His grip around her wrist was bruising, unrelenting, but it was also a tether, a barrier between her and the storm of wolves ready to rip her apart. The auctioneer tried to laugh, though it trembled thinly. A bold performance, Adric. But law is law. No omega holds the right to. Adric's gaze cut to him, and the words withered in his throat. She bought me, Adric said, his voice carrying like thunder, rolling through the chamber. By coin, by law, by blood. By the old ways, that bond is sealed. And I have claimed her in return. You will not touch her. The crowd erupted again, a chorus of protest, of outrage, of fear. Wolves clawed at the walls, their instincts warring with the impossibility of what had been spoken. No law had ever bound an Alpha King to an Omega, not in written memory, not in legend. The elder overseer rose from his seat at the dais, his robes heavy with the scent of ancient authority. His eyes narrowed on Serenya, his lips curling with disdain. Do you even know what you've done, girl? He hissed, his voice a blade. By spending those coins, you have cursed yourself. You've bound yourself to the doom of wolves. You've chained yourself to a monster. Serenya wanted to speak, to deny, to say she hadn't known, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat was dry, her voice lost in the storm. She hadn't known. She hadn't planned. She had only acted on instinct, desperation, and something deeper she couldn't name. Adric pulled her closer, his chest like stone against her shoulder, his presence overwhelming. She knew enough, he said. And in that moment, Serenya realized what the others did not. This wasn't mercy. This wasn't protection for her sake. His claim had saved her only because it served him too. By binding himself to her, he had invoked something ancient, something no rival could touch without igniting war. But it also meant something else. She had doomed them both. For every alpha in that chamber, for every rival pack who had come to revel in his downfall, would not let this stand. As guards surged forward, hesitation in their steps, Serenya saw the truth in Aedric's blood-streaked eyes. They would fight their way out of this hall, or die in it. The claim had shaken the hall. The claim had broken the law, and the claim had begun a war neither of them could escape. The uproar of the hall didn't die when Adric threw the challenger across the chamber. It only thickened, pressed down like a storm cloud ready to break. The air was filled with heat and fury, growls bleeding into curses, the stench of wolves straining against the impossible. Serenya's pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips still clenched around the pouch that had sealed her fate. Her wrist burned where Adric's iron grip tethered her, dragging her close as if he could shield her with his body. Yet even in the shadow of his protection, she felt the weight of the stairs. Hundreds of eyes cutting into her like blades. The cursed Omega. The lawbreaker. The overseer raised his hand, demanding silence, though his voice carried venom instead of calm. Bring forth the coins, he commanded. Let us see what filth was paid to mock the laws of wolves. Serenya flinched when the pouch was torn from her hand by a guard. Its drawstring ripped loose and the contents spilled across the cracked marble floor. The clatter of metal filled the air, sharp and cold. Dozens of silver coins scattered in the torchlight, rolling into the pools of blood left by the fallen alpha. The hall fell silent. One coin spun in place before settling. Its surface caught the firelight, and the markings engraved upon it seemed to breathe. Not the crest of any kingdom, not the mint of any realm. These were not coins at all. They were relics. Each bore the carved likeness of a wolf's head encircled by runes so old they were more scar than script, pulsing faintly as if alive. Across their surfaces shimmered faint threads of crimson, the glint of blood sealed into the silver. The overseer staggered back, the color draining from his face. His voice, usually sharp as a blade, cracked like glass. No, not those. Not here. Murmurs rippled through the chamber like waves breaking. Wolves strained forward, their fury blunted into unease, then dread. Some even stepped back as though the silver might burn them. Serenya stared at the coins, her breath caught in her chest. What are they? But Adric's gaze never wavered. He stared down at them, jaw tight, his expression unreadable but heavy with memory. The first wolves, he said at last, his voice so low it silenced even the boldest growl. These coins are theirs. Serenya turned toward him, confusion laced with fear. First wolves, she whispered, her voice trembling in the cavernous hush. Adric's silver-lit eyes cut to her, and in them she saw something she had never thought possible from the Alpha King. Reverence. The ones who came before us, he said. The first to bear the curse and the gift. The ones who bled the earth and bound the packs. These coins were not minted. They were forged in blood, their silver sealed by sacrifice. They are not currency. He bent, lifting one from the marble floor. The runes flared faintly beneath his fingers, alive to his touch. He held it up for all to see. They are oaths. The words struck the hall like thunder. Gasps erupted, claws scraped, but no one dared deny it. No one dared touch the relics. Serenya shook her head, her lips parting as if the air itself betrayed her. But I only paid them. I thought. Her voice cracked. The memory of desperation filled her chest. She had flung that pouch out of instinct, out of terror, out of the stubborn refusal to watch him die like an animal. She hadn't known. She hadn't meant to. Adric's gaze locked onto her, sharp, unyielding. But beneath the steel, she saw something else. The faintest flicker of understanding. You did not buy me, he said, the words cutting deep into the silence. You invoked a law older than kingdoms, older than crowns. By casting those coins, you summoned a blood pact, the oldest of bonds. I am bound to you, Serenya, and you. His voice darkened, heavy with weight. You are bound to me. The overseer slammed his staff against the floor, voice breaking into fury. Blasphemy! No Omega may wield the packs of the first wolves. Tear them from her hands. But even as guards shifted forward, their hesitation grew into terror. The coins glowed faintly, threads of crimson pulsing with each step closer, as though warning them back. The relics belonged to no Alpha, no Elder. They had answered only to her. Serenya staggered, her knees weakening beneath the truth. Bound? She hadn't saved him. She hadn't freed herself. She had entangled them both in a bond written in blood and myth, binding her fate to his. And if the whispers in the crowd were true, if these were the coins of the first wolves, then such a bond could not be broken, not without blood, not without death. Adric stepped forward, dragging her with him, his presence towering against the encroaching tide of enemies. Hear me, he roared, his voice carrying with the force of dominance that shook the stones themselves. This Omega is mine by blood pact. I claim her as law demands. Deny it, and you do not defy me alone. You defy the first wolves themselves. The silence that followed was suffocating. Wolves shifted uneasily, some lowering their heads, others snarling but refusing to step closer. Fear warred with fury, but the markings on the coins glowed with a promise older than any counsel. Serenya's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. She could feel the pull of the bond even now, like a thread stitched through her heart, tightening with each word he spoke. She was tethered to him, not as slave to master, not as prey to predator, but as something far more dangerous. When Aedric turned his gaze down to her, it wasn't the gaze of a king mocking an omega. It was the gaze of a wolf caught in the same snare, bound, together, forever. And as the torches flickered and the crowd whispered of curses and omens, Serenya realized the truth. The coins had chosen. Not her, not him, them. The fate of wolves had shifted, and their bond was the blade that had cut the thread. The coins still glimmered faintly on the marble floor, their ancient runes breathing with threads of crimson light. Wolves whispered and shifted uneasily in the hall, some backing away, others lingering with narrowed eyes. No one dared touch them. Not after Aedric's declaration. Not after the old law had been invoked. But fear was not surrender. Beneath the low growls and murmurs, Serenya could hear something else threading the crowd. The scraping hunger of those who would rather risk curses than watch an omega hold power meant for alphas. Their stares lingered too long, sharpened with promise. This was not over. Aedric's hand tightened on her wrist, dragging her closer until her shoulder brushed the burn-scarred skin of his arm. His eyes swept the chamber, and every wolf who dared meet them faltered, lowering their gaze. He was still the Alpha King, even in chains. Still, Serenya could feel the tension in him, not fear but vigilance, the kind of focus that came from years on a battlefield, sensing enemies before they struck. He leaned down, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Stay close. Don't falter, no matter what happens. Before she could answer, the overseer barked orders, his desperation thinly veiled behind ceremony. The guards moved to disperse the crowd, but wolves lingered at the edges, lips curling, eyes flicking toward Serenya like predators marking prey. Something icy slid down her spine. She didn't need Aedric's instincts to know. She had painted a target on her own skin. That night, the truth of it came like teeth in the dark. They had not been gone an hour from the market before the first attack. The forest swallowed them whole, torchlight from the hall fading into blackness, as Aedric forced her down a winding trail. The chains that had once bound him now hung snapped from his wrists, melted and broken as though the silver itself had bent to his will. He had torn them off the moment the overseer dared hesitate. Now they glinted faintly in the moonlight, swinging as he led the way through the trees. His every step was calculated, his every breath sharpened by anticipation. Serenya struggled to keep pace, her thin shoes catching on roots and stones, but he didn't slow. The howl came first, low, close. Then the shadows moved. From between the trees they surged, half-shifted wolves cloaked in black, blades glinting, eyes burning with feral intent. Rival pack assassins. Their movements were silent but practiced. They had been waiting. Serenya gasped, stumbling back as one lunged for her throat. The blade never touched her. Aedric was faster. He slammed into the assassin with a growl that shook the branches, one hand tearing the wolf from the air and snapping its neck like dry tinder. Blood sprayed across the roots, and before the body hit the ground, Aedric was already turning, already moving. Another came from the left, twin daggers raised. Aedric caught the wolf's wrist mid-swing, twisting until bone shattered, then buried his own claws into the assassin's chest. He ripped downward, leaving crimson ribbons in his wake. The others hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then they all rushed him. It was a storm of snarls, steel, and claws. Aedric fought like something unleashed, like the chains had not held him back but only kept the world safe from what he truly was. Every strike was brutal, efficient, final. He was not defending himself, he was exterminating. But Serenya's terror grew sharper, not softer. Not because of the blood. She had seen wolves kill before. It was the way the assassins moved. They weren't after Aedric. Their blades, their angles, their snarls, every strike carved toward her. One broke past him, rushing her with fangs bared. Serenya stumbled back, her breath hitching. The assassin's claws caught her sleeve, slicing through cloth and grazing skin. Before pain could register, Aedric was there. His hand wrapped the wolf's throat, lifting him clean off the ground. Silver eyes flared and his voice rumbled like thunder. "She is mine." The wolf clawed at his grip, choking, wheezing. Aedric squeezed until the body went limp, then dropped it like refuse. Blood pooled at Serenya's feet. She staggered, clutching her torn sleeve, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Aedric turned, chest heaving, blood dripping from his claws. His gaze raked over her, lingering on the cut at her arm. Something raw and furious flared across his face. "They weren't here for me," he said, voice low, dangerous. "They were here for you." Serenya froze. "Me? But I'm an Omega." He cut her off, stepping closer, towering over her. His eyes were no longer only silver. Something darker churned in their depths. Suspicion. Calculation. An outcast Omega who somehow holds coins that belong to the first wolves, who walks into an auction and binds an alpha king without knowing what she's done. Serenya shook her head, words tumbling out, broken and desperate. "I didn't know what they were. I swear it. They were my mother's. They were all I had." Aedric's stare burned into her, unyielding. "Then your mother knew." The silence that followed was heavier than the forest around them. Serenya's lips trembled, but before she could speak, a sound pierced the night. A whisper, a voice, not from the trees, not from him, from within her own mind. Serenya. She gasped, stumbling, clutching her head. The world spun, the blood-stained forest fading at the edges of her vision. And then she was standing somewhere else. The ground was ash beneath her feet, the sky split by a blood-red moon. The wind carried the stench of fire and rot. Shadows moved across the horizon, vast and formless, and in their midst stood a figure cloaked in light. Her mother. Not as Serenya remembered her, weary and pale, coughing through nights of hunger, but radiant, her eyes aglow with something that was not entirely human. Her lips moved, and the voice thundered inside Serenya's skull. "The blood moon will demand its price." Serenya's breath hitched. She reached forward, but her fingers passed through smoke. "Mother, what does that mean? What price? Why me?" But the figure only repeated the words, voice like an echo carved into stone. "The blood moon will demand its price." The vision cracked. Shadows swallowed the horizon. The moon bled brighter and brighter until her eyes seared. Serenya screamed and collapsed into the dirt of the forest, the taste of blood sharp in her mouth. Aedric was crouched over her instantly, his hand gripping her shoulder. His voice was sharper than claws. "What did you see?" Her chest heaved. She tried to speak, but the words tangled with terror. She pressed a shaking hand to her temple, whispering the only phrase she could force past her lips. "The blood moon will demand its price." Aedric's eyes darkened. And for the first time since the auction, the Alpha King looked unsettled. The forest held its breath after Serenya's words. The torchlight of the assassins guttered out in the dirt, leaving only moonlight slanting through the trees, cold, pale, merciless. Serenya sat trembling against the roots of an ancient oak, her body still racked by the echo of her mother's voice. "The blood moon will demand its price." The phrase pulsed inside her skull like a heartbeat, each repetition tightening the air around her chest. Aedric crouched before her, his silver eyes gleaming with that dangerous calm he wore before the kill. He said nothing for a long moment, studying her with the silence of a man who heard more in what wasn't spoken than in what was. Finally he rose. His bloodied chains clinked as he straightened to his full height, scanning the tree line. "We can't stay here. They'll send more." His voice was steady, commanding, but there was something in it, a thread of unease he could not hide. He offered her his hand. She hesitated, staring at the claws still slick with the blood of those who had tried to kill her. Then she placed her hand in his, and his grip tightened, warm and unyielding, pulling her to her feet. They didn't make it far before the hunt began. The first sign was the wind shifting, carrying the musk of wolves who were neither wild nor free. Bounty hunters. Then came the horn, a low, bone-deep sound blown from the ridges above, echoing through the valleys. The forest seemed to recoil. Birds burst from the trees. Deer fled through the undergrowth. The air thickened with menace. Adric's jaw tightened. The Elder Council. Serenya's breath caught. They've sent hunters for us. For you, he corrected, though his voice was colder than stone. They think you're a threat. Before she could respond, the forest erupted. Dozens of wolves poured from the shadows, armored in blackened steel, their weapons gleaming with silver edges. Some were half-shifted, snarling with jaws too wide for their human faces. Others padded on four paws, eyes glowing like coals. The crest of the Elder Council glimmered faintly on their armor, a broken crown beneath a wolf's claw. Serenya froze. The sight of them was overwhelming. An army meant for war, not for one girl and a half-broken king. But Aedric didn't falter. With a growl that rattled her bones, he shoved her behind him and leapt into the oncoming tide. The clash was thunder. Steel bit against claws, silver blades tore through the night. Sparks lit the trees as weapons clanged. Wolves snarled. Bodies hit the earth. Aedric fought like fire incarnate, every strike vicious and precise, his movements a blur of power and rage. One hunter lunged with a spear tipped in molten silver. Aedric dodged, seized the shaft and snapped it clean before driving the jagged end through the wolf's chest. Another came from behind, blade arcing for his spine. Serenya screamed, but Aedric spun, catching the wrist mid-swing and wrenching it until bone cracked. His claws drove up beneath the hunter's jaw, silencing him in a spray of crimson. Serenya pressed back against the tree trunk, her breath ragged. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but her feet refused to move. She couldn't leave him, but then it happened. One of the hunters darted in with a blade slicked in quicksilver. The strike cut across Aedric's ribs. The Alpha King staggered. The wound sizzled, burning into his flesh as if the blade had carried fire itself. Smoke curled from the gash. He roared in agony, staggering back, and for the first time since the auction, Serenya saw it. Weakness. The silver was eating him alive. Hunters howled, sensing the shift, and closed in. Serenya's body moved before her mind did. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands trembling as she pressed them to the wound. Blood gushed hot and thick between her fingers, staining her skin. "Don't touch it," Aedric growled, trying to push her away. But his strength faltered, and then the impossible happened. The moment her hand touched his blood, her skin seared. Pain ripped up her arm like fire, and she screamed, trying to wrench back. But she couldn't. Her palm clung to his wound as if magnetized, her flesh burning, branding. Light flared beneath her skin. A mark carved itself into her palm, glowing scarlet against the silvered blood. Not drawn, not written, summoned. A sigil, curling and sharp like runes carved in fire. The hunters froze. Even Aedric's roar choked into silence, his eyes widening as he stared at her hand pressed against his body. The sigil pulsed once, twice. Then the glow sank inward, branding itself into her flesh. When Serenya finally tore her hand free, she stumbled back, gasping, clutching the burning mark. The sigil still shimmered faintly on her skin, throbbing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The wound on Aedric's ribs was no longer gushing. The silver still burned him, but slower, weaker, as if her touch had interfered, dampened the poison's hunger. Silence fell, heavy and terrible. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Even wolves bred for blood and silver hesitated now, their eyes darting between her marked hand and the Alpha King who still stood, breathing, alive. Aedric pushed himself upright, blood streaming down his chest, silver smoke curling from his wound. His gaze locked onto Serenya, burning with questions he didn't voice. Instead, he turned to the hunters, his voice ragged but unbroken. Run. No roar, no scream, just a command. And something in his tone, something in the mark that now glowed on Serenya's skin, made them obey. The hunters withdrew into the trees, their snarls fading into silence, leaving only the scent of blood and smoke. Serenya collapsed to her knees, clutching her marked hand. Tears blurred her vision, her chest heaving with terror and confusion. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Adric knelt before her, his body trembling with pain, his eyes sharp with something far more dangerous than fury. "That sigil." His voice was hoarse. "It's not the mark of a wolf. It's older, wilder. Your mother didn't just leave you coins, Serenya. She left you power that no Omega should carry." Her heart hammered. "But I don't want it. I don't even understand it." "You will," Adric cut in, his hand seizing her wrist, holding her burning palm between them. His silver eyes glowed against the night, fierce and unrelenting. "Because whatever this is, the world will come for it, and they will come for you." The mark pulsed again, as if agreeing, binding. Serenya shuddered, staring at her own hand as if it belonged to someone else. The blood moon's whisper echoed once more in her mind. The blood moon will demand its price. And this time, she feared it would take more than blood. The forest was still, but not silent. Blood still smoked on the leaves, silver still hissed where it had scorched bark and flesh alike. The hunters were gone, their retreat swallowed by the night, yet their presence lingered like a curse. Serenya crouched in the dirt, cradling her burned palm against her chest. The mark pulsed beneath her skin, crimson threads alive in the moonlight, glowing with every ragged breath she drew. It wasn't just etched into her flesh. It was inside her, tethered to her very heartbeat. She wanted to tear it off. She wanted to scrub her skin raw until the cursed thing disappeared. But no matter how tightly she pressed her nails into it, no matter how desperately she rubbed, the sigil burned on. Adric's shadow loomed above her. His wound still bled sluggishly, smoke curling from the edges, but his attention was not on the pain. It was on her hand, on the glowing mark. He knelt slowly, not with the carefulness of pity, but with the weight of revelation. His hand hovered near hers, claws flexing, then finally settled on her wrist. His grip was firm, inescapable. He turned her hand toward the moonlight, studying the crest as though the sight clawed at some ancient corner of his memory. For the first time since she had seen him in chains, he looked shaken, not furious, not calculating. Shaken. "Do you know what this is?" His voice was quiet, but beneath it was the tension of a storm waiting to break. Serenya swallowed, her throat dry as ash. "No, I don't understand it. It just appeared." He exhaled slowly, a sound too close to a growl. His silver eyes lifted to hers, hard and unrelenting. "This isn't just a mark. This is a crest." Her brows knitted. "A crest?" "The crest of the Alpha Queen," he said, and the words were spoken like a curse. The world seemed to tilt. The trees pressed closer, the shadows thickened, and Serenya's pulse stuttered. She stared at him, searching his face for any trace of jest, but his gaze was stone, heavy, and certain. "That's impossible," she whispered. "There is no Alpha Queen, there never was." "There was." Adric cut in, his voice edged with a sharpness that brooked no denial. "Long before packs fractured into kingdoms, before elders claimed to rule, there was a queen, one chosen not by dominance but by the blood of the first wolves themselves. She carried the crest as proof of her right to bind alphas to her will." Serenya's stomach twisted. "Bind alphas?" "Not like the mate bond," he said, releasing her wrist but never his stare. "Stronger, deadlier. If she chose, she could make an alpha kneel. Break his dominance. Strip him of power until nothing remained." The words struck her like a blow. She glanced down at her palm. at the glowing sigil that throbbed with every beat of her heart. Her voice cracked. "You're saying, this mark means I can rule," he finished flatly. "If they knew, every alpha alive would come for you, some to kill you, others to own you." Serenya shook her head violently, backing away until her spine pressed against the tree. No, this isn't real. I can't be, I'm just an Omega." But even as the words left her lips, they tasted hollow. The mark pulsed harder as if mocking her denial. Her breath came faster, panic clawing at her chest. The memory of the assassins, the hunters, the overseer's stare, all of them hadn't just wanted Aedric. They had wanted her. They must have known. Somehow, someone must have guessed. Her hands trembled as she pressed her marked palm into the dirt, trying to smother its glow. But the light bled through the soil, stubborn, merciless. Aedric moved forward, crouching low, his voice low and sharp as he caught her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me," he growled. "You will not speak of this, not to anyone. Do you understand? If the Council sees this mark, they will tear you apart piece by piece. If another alpha lays eyes on it, he will chain you until you break. Hide it, even from your own shadow." Tears blurred her vision. She nodded, unable to find words past the weight in her chest. He released her and turned his gaze skyward. Through the canopy, the moon hung swollen and pale, veiled faintly with crimson at its edge. His jaw clenched. "The blood moon approaches," he muttered, almost to himself. "And it chose you." Serenya's breath caught. The vision of her mother crashed back into her mind, her voice echoing across the void of memory. The blood moon will demand its price. The words and the mark and the silver wound, all of it tangled into a knot of dread so tight she could scarcely breathe. She curled her marked hand to her chest, hiding it in the folds of her sleeve, though the skin still burned as if seared from within. Aedric rose, towering above her, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. His silver eyes glinted with something fierce and unspoken. "You are no ordinary Omega, Serenya Vale," he said, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "And no matter how much you deny it, the world will come for you." She wanted to scream at him, to deny it again, to beg for him to take it back. But all she could do was press her fist against her racing heart and whisper to herself, trembling, "If they see it, I'll never survive." And for the first time since the auction, the girl who had spent her last coins to save a king felt the crushing truth. She might have bought his freedom, but she had just sold her own. The fire crackled low in the hollowed cave, its flames gnawing at brittle wood Aedric had gathered from the forest. Smoke curled lazily toward the jagged ceiling, and shadows danced across the stone walls, shivering with every flicker of heat. Outside, the forest lay quiet, too quiet, the hush of predators holding their breath. Serenya sat pressed against the far wall, her knees drawn to her chest, her marked hand hidden beneath the folds of her torn cloak. She had not spoken since the words left Aedric's lips. "You are no ordinary Omega." She wanted to pretend it wasn't true, that the crest wasn't real, that it was some cruel accident. But the burn on her palm would not fade, and the echo of her mother's warning gnawed at her bones. The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Aedric paced near the fire, his body restless despite the weakness that still lingered from the silver wound. His movements were sharp, deliberate, as though he was caging fury within every step. His silver eyes cut toward her, then away, then back again, until at last his restraint shattered. "Tell me the truth." His voice rumbled low, dangerous. Serenya blinked up at him. I don't know what you mean." He stalked closer, his shadow falling over her, his gaze burned down, merciless. "The crest does not appear on chance. Blood alone carries it. You, an outcast Omega, bearing it? That is no accident. Were you sent?" The accusation speared through her chest. She flinched, her back pressing harder against the cold stone. "Sent? By who? The elders, he snapped, his voice reverberating against the cave walls. Do not feign ignorance with me. Was this their trap? Did they mark you, hide you among the discarded, only to unleash you at the moment of their choosing? Did they send you to me? Her eyes widened, horror lacing her breath. No, I swear I didn't even know this existed until tonight. But his expression didn't soften. He loomed closer, and though he didn't touch her, his presence was crushing, suffocating. The question in his eyes was sharper than any blade. Are you my savior or my betrayal? Serenya's throat tightened. Words fumbled at the edge of her tongue, desperate to escape, but all that spilled was the truth she had buried for so long. I don't remember much of my childhood, she whispered, her voice trembling. Only fragments. I was small when it happened. The banishment. I remember fire, smoke. I remember my mother's arms pulling me into the dark, whispering words I didn't understand. She said I was too dangerous. The words cracked something inside her. She pressed her hand against her mouth, trying to steady her breath, but it shook anyway. Too dangerous, she repeated, softer this time. Broken. Adric stilled, the fury in his stance faltering, curiosity bleeding into suspicion. Go on, he commanded, though the edge in his voice had dulled. Serenya closed her eyes, clawing through the haze of memory. Faces blurred, voices warped, but pieces clung stubbornly to her. Her mother's frightened eyes, her father's growl of defiance, the gleam of armored wolves in the moonlight. I don't know why, she admitted, shaking her head. But I remember the elders. I remember their robes, their cold voices. They ordered something. They ordered. Her chest heaved. She dug her nails into her knees, grounding herself against the tide of grief threatening to drown her. They ordered my family's death. The cave swallowed her confession, the fire's crackle suddenly too loud, too harsh. Adric's eyes narrowed, studying her as if weighing the truth against the lies he'd heard his entire life. All of them. His tone was heavy but not unbelieving. She nodded, tears spilling unchecked. Yes, my parents, my brothers, everyone, slaughtered in one night. Only my mother lived long enough to take me beyond the borders, to hide me in the slums. She told me to run, to never let anyone see me bleed, to keep my head down and survive. Her voice faltered, breaking into a bitter laugh that held no humor. Survive. That's all I've ever done. Until that night in the auction hall. Until you. The silence that followed was different now, not taut, but heavy. It pressed on them both, filled with truths neither wanted to carry. Adric's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to the flames. He had seen the elders' cruelty, had bled under their decrees. But this was something deeper, something that stank of the shadows they never spoke of. If what you say is true, he muttered, then the elders knew what you were all along. They tried to erase you, and failed. Serenya curled tighter into herself, the weight of it crushing. I didn't ask for this. I never wanted to be more than I am. I only ever wanted peace, to live unnoticed. Adric crouched before her, his eyes sharp but no longer cruel. He tilted his head, studying her face as though she were some puzzle carved in blood and fire. Peace is a lie the elders feed the weak, he said, voice low but steady. They banished you because you threatened their hold. That crest on your hand, it is not a curse, it is power. And power, little wolf, is never forgotten. They will come for you again. Her breath hitched, panic fluttering in her chest. Then I'm doomed. I can't fight them. I can't even fight myself. Adric's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't cruel either. It was the expression of a man who had seen wars rise and fall, who had faced death and still defied it. You are bound to me now, he reminded her, his silver eyes glinting. by coin, by blood, by law older than the elders themselves. If they come for you, they will face me, and I do not fall easily." Something in his tone, steel wrapped in certainty, struck her deeper than any promise of safety ever had. For the first time since her mother's arms had left her, Serenya felt a fragile thread of something alien, something dangerous, something like hope. But beneath it, beneath the warmth of his vow, a darker thought stirred. If the elders had slaughtered her family for the crest, what would they do when they discovered she had lived? And worse, what would they do when they learned she had bound the last true Alpha King to her side? The night had thickened, wrapping the forest in a cloak of silence broken only by the distant call of a hunting owl. The fire in the cave had long since dimmed to embers, and though the warmth clung stubbornly to the stone, Serenya felt cold seep through her bones. Sleep had refused her. Every time her eyes closed, memories stirred. Fire swallowing her childhood home, her mother's whisper of, "too dangerous," and the burn of the crest now seared into her palm. Adric's vow that she was bound to him, that he would stand against the elders, should have been a bomb. Yet it terrified her more than the threats, because power came with a price, and she feared she had not yet begun to pay. When dawn broke, it did not bring peace. The forest stirred before the sun fully crowned the horizon. A tension bled through the trees, the hush of prey animals vanishing, the scent of wolves sharp on the wind. Adric's head lifted instantly, his silver gaze narrowing. He sniffed the air once, twice, then his lips pulled back in a low snarl. "He's here." Serenya's stomach tightened. "Who?" But she had little time for the answer. From between the trees stepped a man cloaked in black, his stride smooth, deliberate, like a predator who knew he had already cornered his prey. His hair was dark as midnight, his eyes burning amber with that unmistakable glow of dominance. Wolves didn't need crowns or thrones to mark themselves. Their presence did it for them. This one carried the kind of aura that suffocated, commanding attention even from the air itself. Kalen Dragor. Serenya didn't know his name yet, but she felt him in her marrow. An alpha, rival, dangerous, and utterly certain of his power. Adric moved instantly, stepping between her and the intruder, his stance a wall of muscle and fury. His voice came low, lethal. "Dragor." The newcomer's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Adric, I thought I smelled the stench of defiance." The two alphas faced one another in the clearing, the tension snapping sharp as a drawn blade. Their dominance clashed invisibly, rippling through the air, raising the hairs along Serenya's neck. She could feel it pressing on her lungs, forcing her to swallow hard just to breathe. "What do you want?" Adric's tone was ice. Kalen tilted his head, his amber gaze sliding past Adric to rest on Serenya. He studied her with unnerving precision, his smile sharpening. "I want what everyone wants now." His eyes flicked briefly to her sleeve, as if he could see through the fabric to the glowing crest she hid. "The girl." Serenya's pulse thundered. She instinctively drew back, but Kalen's stare held her pinned. "You've bound yourself to a man who cannot protect you," Kalen continued, his words smooth, coaxing. "A king in name only, hunted by every elder's decree. Stay with him and you'll be dragged into his grave. Come with me and you'll live. More than live. I will protect you. You'll have a place beside me, not beneath." The promise slithered into the air like poison wrapped in silk. Serenya's throat tightened. A part of her wanted to spit at him, to laugh in his face. But another part, the small, terrified girl who had lived her whole life running, hiding, surviving, trembled. He wasn't wrong. Adric was a hunted man. The council wanted his head. Anyone who stood beside him became a target. Kalen's eyes softened with something that almost looked like pity. "You don't belong at his side, Omega. You deserve more than being his shield, his pawn. Come with me and I'll make sure the elders never touch you again." "Enough." Adric's voice was a growl of pure steel, His claws flexed, silver light flashing in his irises. She is mine. Kalen chuckled darkly. Yours? Or a leash you can't cut? His smile widened cruelly. Tell me, Serenya, did you choose him? Or did the coins choose for you? The words struck like a blade. Serenya's chest clenched, her breath faltering. The memory of the auction hall burned behind her eyes. The last coins in her hand, the desperate gamble, and the law Aedric himself had named, an ancient pact older than kingdoms. Did she choose him? Or was it fate? Her silence was answer enough. Aedric lunged, the ground cracked beneath his leap, his claws aimed straight for Kalen's throat. The rival alpha dodged fast as lightning, and their clash shook the clearing. Claws tore into bark, snarls ripped the air apart, dominance collided like thunder. Serenya stumbled back, her heart racing, fear and awe tangling in her chest. This was no brawl. This was two storms colliding. The sheer force of it rattled her bones. Aedric's fury was raw, primal, his strikes heavy enough to break stone. Kalen moved with dangerous grace, every counter a taunt, every dodge a reminder that he was not easily broken. You'd kill me in front of her? Kalen sneered between blows, blocking Aedric's strike with his forearm. What a loyal king you are. Stay away from her. Aedric's roar split the air, his claws raking across Kalen's shoulder, drawing blood. The scent of it filled the clearing, metallic and sharp. But Kalen only laughed, even through the pain. She'll see it soon enough. You can't protect her. Not from them. Not from me. Not even from yourself. Aedric's eyes blazed silver, murder burning in every line of his body. He raised his hand for the killing blow. Aedric! Serenya's voice cut through the chaos, raw, desperate. He froze. His claws hovered inches from Kalen's throat, his chest heaving with ragged fury. For a heartbeat, all that existed was his rage, her voice, and the choice between them. Serenya stumbled forward, her marked hand outstretched. Stop, please. Her eyes locked on his, wide with something deeper than fear. Not pity, not weakness. Something else, something that tethered him, even in his rage. Slowly, with visible strain, Aedric lowered his hand. His claws retracted, though his body still shook with restrained violence. Kalen smirked, blood dripping from his shoulder. He straightened, brushing dirt from his cloak as though the fight had been nothing but entertainment. His amber gaze lingered on Serenya. You saved me, he said softly, almost admiring. Even against him. Serenya swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I only stopped needless blood, that's all. But Kalen's smirk deepened as if he saw the doubt she was trying so hard to bury. He dipped his head in mock respect, then turned back toward the forest. Think on my offer, little wolf, he murmured. The day will come when you'll wish you had. And with that, he vanished into the shadows, leaving only silence in his wake. The clearing remained thick with the scent of blood and dominance. Aedric stood stiff, his shoulders heaving, his gaze still burning where Kalen had disappeared. Then he turned on her. Why did you stop me? His voice was low, sharp, dangerous. Serenya's breath caught. Because killing him here would have only proved him right. That you're nothing but fury and death. That you can't protect me without destroying everything around you. His jaw clenched, his silver eyes flashing with hurt that he masked beneath anger. And you believe him, don't you? That I can't protect you. That I'll fail you. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Because doubt gnawed at her no matter how much she wanted to deny it. The silence between them fractured, raw and jagged. For the first time since the auction, the bond between them trembled, stretched thin by mistrust. And somewhere in the distance, Kalen's laughter echoed, though he was long gone. The silence between them lingered long after Kalen's shadow had vanished into the forest. Serenya's words still hung in the air, her doubts, her plea for him not to kill. Adric stood rigid, his jaw set, his chest rising and falling with the remnants of fury. But beneath the anger was something heavier, something colder. Fear. Not of Kaelin, not of the elders, but of her. Because Kaelin had struck a wound no claw could reach. And though Serenya's voice had stopped Adric from spilling blood, her silence afterward had left him bleeding in another way. By nightfall they had put distance between themselves and the clearing, moving through the dense forest until the ground grew damp and the air thick with moss. Serenya walked a few paces behind, clutching her marked hand against her chest, her thoughts a storm. Kaelin's voice wouldn't leave her. Did you choose him, or did the coins choose for you? She had no answer, and that frightened her more than anything. They camped near a river where the moonlight fractured across the black water. Adric kept his back to her, tending the fire in silence. Serenya wanted to speak, to mend the rift between them, but words felt fragile, unworthy against the storm building in both their chests. It was then that the air shifted, a rustle of leaves, the faint tinkling of beads, the scent of herbs thick as incense. Serenya tensed, her eyes snapping to the tree line. Adric rose in a heartbeat, claws ready, his growl slicing the night. From the shadows emerged a figure draped in tattered robes, hunched but deliberate, eyes glowing faintly under the hood. Not Alpha, not Omega. Something older. A seer, Adric muttered, his tone laced with distrust. His claws did not retract. The figure stopped at the edge of the firelight, lifting a frail hand. Bangles clinked against the wrist, and the voice that followed was dry as withered leaves. The blood moon rises, and with it, the truth. Serenya's breath caught. What truth? The seer's head turned, gaze falling on her. Though hidden in shadow, Serenya felt the weight of those eyes pierce through her skin, past her bones, deep into the very marrow of her being. The Omega who is not Omega, the seer whispered, voice carrying like a chant, will decide the fate of Alphas, crown or ruin, dominion or ashes. She holds the thread that binds the king. The fire snapped loudly, sparks hissing into the air. Serenya froze, her heart hammering. The Omega who is not Omega. Her hand throbbed, the crest beneath her skin glowing faintly as if answering the seer's words. What do you mean? Serenya's voice cracked. I can't. The seer tilted their head. Hidden at birth, sealed, so that your power would sleep until the binding awoke it. They feared you, child, feared what you would become if the king's blood touched yours. And now it has. A chill flooded Serenya's veins, the fragments of her past, her family's slaughter, her mother's desperate flight, the whispered warnings, all snapped together in brutal clarity. She hadn't been banished for weakness. She hadn't been cast aside because she was worthless. She had been hidden. You lie, Adric snarled, stepping forward, though his voice carried less conviction than he intended. Prophecies are riddles spoken by cowards who cannot wield steel. You seek to sow doubt. The seer's gaze shifted to him, ancient and unflinching. Doubt is already in you, King. You fear her. You fear the mark that binds you to her, for it may crown you higher than any Alpha before, or destroy you utterly. Adric's breath stilled, his claws flexed, his body taut. He wanted to deny it, to call the seer mad, but the truth had already sunk its teeth into him. He had seen the crest. He had felt its pull, stronger than any bond, older than any law. If the prophecy was true, Serenya was not his salvation. She was his undoing. Serenya shook her head violently, her voice rising. No, I don't want any of this. I never asked to be some prophecy. The seer leaned closer, their voice dropping to a rasp that clawed at her soul. The blood moon does not ask what you want. It only takes. When its shadow bleeds across the sky, you will choose, crown or ruin, king or corpse. That is the fate carved into you. The words lodged in the air, heavy as chains. Serenya stumbled back, clutching her chest. Her breath came fast, shallow, panic clawing up her throat. Her life had been one of survival, of scraping coin to coin, day to day. She had never wanted power. She had never sought thrones or crowns. But destiny, no, cruelty, had placed them on her shoulders anyway. Adric's stare burned into her, fierce and conflicted. For the first time she saw fear in his eyes, not of battle, not of death, but of her. "Leave," Adric growled at the seer, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. The seer only smiled faintly, as though they had expected the command. "The blood moon rises in 3 nights," they whispered, their figure retreating back into the shadows. "And when it does, the world will bow to what she decides." And then they were gone. The forest swallowed their presence, leaving only silence and the ragged sound of Serenya's breathing. She turned to Adric, her voice breaking. "You believe them, don't you?" Adric's jaw worked, his silver eyes locked on hers. He wanted to deny it, to reassure her, to say he would tear the prophecy to shreds with his own claws. But the words would not come. Because deep down he did believe, and that belief was a blade now lodged between them. Serenya's shoulders shook. Her marked hand pressed to her heart as if she could claw the prophecy out. "If I could destroy you, then maybe Kaelin was right. Maybe I'm only a danger to you." "Enough," Adric snapped, too harsh, his voice cracking like a whip. "Do not speak his name again." The fire flared with the force of his fury. Serenya recoiled, her eyes glistening with hurt. Adric turned away, his back rigid, his silhouette carved against the flames. Inside, war raged in him, the instinct to protect her, to shield her from the world, and the dread that the greatest threat she faced was the one she carried inside. 3 nights until the blood moon, 3 nights until prophecy demanded its price. And for the first time since their bond began, neither Serenya nor Adric knew if they would survive each other. The night after the seer's departure was suffocating. The forest held its breath, the fire burned low, and between Serenya and Adric stretched a silence more dangerous than any blade. The words, crown or ruin, still clung to the air like smoke, refusing to leave. By dawn, Adric was restless, his instincts sharpened to a blade's edge. He moved like a wolf cornered, pacing the edges of their small camp, sniffing the wind, scanning shadows. Serenya sat curled on a fallen log, her hands pressed tightly together, trying to steady her heartbeat. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and she was right. They came at dusk, not with the thunder of charging wolves, not with the roar of war drums, but with silence, precision, inevitability. The first arrow hissed into the earth at Adric's feet. Adric spun, claws unsheathing, but before he could react, nets woven with silver threads fell from the canopy above. The metallic bite of silver sparked against his skin, forcing a guttural snarl from his chest. "Stay back!" Adric roared at Serenya, ripping through one net with brute strength, but more dropped in its place, pinning him down. His silver eyes burned, fury incarnate, but even kings had limits against silver's poison. Serenya screamed his name, but a hand clamped over her mouth, silencing her. Rough arms pulled her back into the shadows. She thrashed wildly, claws scratching, feet kicking against the earth, but there were too many. The last thing she saw before the hood was forced over her head was Adric fighting like a beast against chains that even he could not break. His roar shattered the dusk, shaking the trees. But then the silver burned deeper, and his voice was drowned by the sound of crackling restraints. Darkness. When the hood was pulled away, Serenya found herself in a hall that reeked of old blood and incense. The chamber was circular, the walls carved with runes that shimmered faintly in torchlight. Wolves stood along the edges, cloaked, silent. But it was the figures in the center who made her breath seize. The Elder Council, 6 of them, their faces hidden beneath veils of silver-threaded cloth, their presence suffocating. Power clung to them, not of strength or claws, but of age, knowledge and authority twisted into something cruel. Serenya's wrists burned where silver shackles bound her, but she forced herself to stand straight, chin raised. "Do you know why you are here?" one elder asked, their voice ancient and layered as though more than one spoke at once. Serenya swallowed, her throat dry. "Because you're afraid of me." A ripple of amusement passed through them, a hiss of laughter as cold as knives. "Not afraid, prepared," another elder replied. "We have waited for the blood moon to rise and for you to step out of the shadows where we buried you." Serenya's stomach twisted. You were the ones who ordered the slaughter of your family?" the first elder finished. "Yes, to cage the storm before it broke the world. But your mother hid you. Foolish woman, her love cost us dearly." Serenya's nails dug into her palms. The words pierced, but rage gave her voice strength. "You murdered them. My blood, my life, you stole it from me. We preserved the world," another elder hissed. "And now, you will finish what was written." The chamber fell into silence. The air seemed to tighten, pressing against Serenya's chest until she could hardly breathe. "On the night of the blood moon," the elder continued, "you must kill the Alpha King. His bloodline has ruled through chains of dominance for centuries. His tyranny poisons the packs. His existence shackles all wolves beneath his will. End him and you free us all." The words struck Serenya like cold steel. "Kill Aedric." She staggered back, shaking her head violently. No, you're lying. He's not a tyrant." The elders moved closer, their veils swaying like shadows. "Do you not feel it, child? The bond that strangles you, the mark that burns your skin. He binds you because his blood is cursed. The first wolves gave him dominion over us all. One king, endless chains. You were born to sever it." Her crest flared beneath her skin, glowing faintly even through the shackles. The elders' voices deepened, their words slithering into her ears like venom. "The prophecy is not a choice. It is law. Kill him under the blood moon, and every wolf will rise free. Refuse." The torches flared, shadows stretching into monstrous shapes. "And war will consume all. Packs will burn. Blood will drown the land. And it will be by your hand, because you denied your fate." Serenya's knees trembled, her heart screamed denial, but her mind twisted with terror. She saw Aedric's face, his fury, his strength, his defiance. She saw his silver eyes, the eyes that had softened only when they looked at her, and then she saw them filled with pain, with betrayal, with death at her hands. "I won't," she whispered hoarsely, shaking her head. "I won't kill him. I can't." The elders' laughter rose, shrill and merciless. "You will." One stepped forward, lifting a blade from the altar at the center of the chamber. The steel shimmered with runes etched along its length, glowing red like blood under moonlight. This blade was forged for one purpose. When the moon bleeds, it will cut the bond between king and mate. It will end him. The weapon was pressed into her bound hands, its weight unbearable, its glow searing against her skin. "Betrayal at dusk," the elder intoned, their voice ringing with finality. "That is your destiny. You will strike, or the world will burn." Serenya's vision blurred. She wanted to scream, to fight, to deny the destiny they thrust upon her. But the blade pulsed against her palms, and deep within her mark, something answered. The crest throbbed, glowing hotter, as though agreeing with the blade's call. Serenya gasped, horror flooding her veins. Because in that moment she realized the elders might not be lying. Somewhere inside her, a part of her wanted to kill Aedric. The night tasted of ash when they returned her. Serenya stumbled into the clearing, her wrists still burning from the silver shackles, her fingers raw from gripping the cursed blade the elders had forced upon her. She'd hidden it deep beneath her cloak, but she could feel its pulse against her skin, like a second heartbeat, like a whisper that wouldn't silence. The campfire had burned low, but Aedric was waiting. always waiting. He stood at the edge of the firelight, his figure cut against the shadows like a sentinel carved of iron. The silver burns across his arms still smoldered from the elder's nets, but his stance was unyielding. His eyes, God's those eyes, glowed faintly, locked on her the instant she appeared. Relief flickered there. Relief and suspicion. "Where did they take you?" His voice was rough stone, ground low, sharp. Serenya froze. The words caught in her throat. To speak the truth would mean betraying him. To lie felt just the same. "Nowhere," she whispered, forcing the syllables out. I was taken. Questioned. Nothing more." His jaw tightened, the muscle ticking. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, like a predator circling prey. "Nothing more." Serenya's breath hitched. He stopped inches from her, the heat of him suffocating, the scent of smoke and iron overwhelming. His hand shot forward, not to strike, not to chain, but to grip her chin, forcing her gaze to his. "Do not lie to me, Serenya." His silver eyes cut through her like blades. "You left in chains, and you return with shadows clinging to you. What did they tell you?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. She tried to turn away, but his hold only tightened. The blade beneath her cloak pulsed as if mocking her, reminding her of its presence, of its purpose. She felt its heat climbing up her arm, a poisonous reminder of the choice she carried. "I don't—" Her voice cracked, and she hated the weakness in it. "I don't want to speak of it." Silence stretched between them. His grip loosened, his hand falling away as though the contact had burned him. He turned, pacing back toward the fire. The flames painted his scars in bronze, his shoulders tense with rage he barely leashed. "You keep secrets from me," he said at last, voice low, dangerous. "You, of all people, after everything." Serenya's throat tightened. She wanted to scream that she wasn't hiding herself. She was hiding the truth to save him. But the words tangled, a knot of guilt and dread. She sank onto the log, clutching her cloak close as if it could shield her from the weight of prophecy. Minutes passed like hours. The fire crackled, the forest whispered, and the space between them grew heavy. Then, Aedric moved again. Not with anger this time, but with something darker. He crossed the clearing, crouched in front of her, and caught her wrists in his hands. His touch was rough, calloused, but not cruel. He lifted her hands, inspecting them, his eyes narrowing at the burns left by silver. "They hurt you," he said almost to himself. His thumb traced the angry lines across her skin, gentler now, almost reverent. The air shifted. Serenya's chest tightened as she stared at him. He wasn't the Alpha King in that moment, not the beast the elders claimed cursed the world. He was a man, scarred, wounded, furious, and yet bound to her in a way that frightened them both. "Why did you come back?" he asked suddenly. His gaze lifted to hers, sharp, searching. "You could have run. They could have promised you safety, freedom, anything. And yet you returned. To me." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The truth swelled in her chest, threatening to spill. "Because you are mine, and I cannot bear to leave you." But she bit it back. Instead, she whispered, "Because you would have burned the world to find me." His breath caught, sharp and uneven. For the first time, the steel in his posture faltered. The weight of her words sank between them like a stone in deep water. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling upward. Neither moved. Neither spoke. And then, Aedric's hand slid from her wrists to her jaw, pulling her forward, closing the space between them. His mouth crashed against hers, fierce, desperate, claiming. Serenya gasped into him, her cloak slipping from her shoulders, the cursed blade thudding softly against the earth beneath the log. She didn't care. Not in that moment. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, as though she could anchor herself in his fire and drown out the prophecy that threatened to tear them apart. The kiss deepened, rough and hungry, the kind born not of tenderness but of survival. of two broken souls clinging to each other against a world that wanted them destroyed. His teeth grazed her lower lip, and a shiver ran down her spine. She pressed closer, every nerve alight, every thought consumed by him. But even in passion there was shadow. The crest beneath her skin flared, glowing faintly, reacting to the bond between them. The mark pulsed against her heartbeat, reminding her of what the elders had said. The Omega who is not Omega will decide the fate of Alphas. And as Adric's lips moved against hers, as his hands held her like she was the last tether to his sanity, she realized with bone-deep terror that her choice was no longer only hers. It was written into the very chains that bound them both. When at last their lips parted, their foreheads resting together, their breaths ragged, Adric whispered the words she feared most. "I would kill for you, Serenya. I would die for you. But if you betray me..." His thumb brushed her jaw, tender and threatening all at once. "I will burn this world to ash." Her heart twisted, torn between love and doom. She closed her eyes, hiding the tears that threatened, for pressed against her thigh, the cursed blade still pulsed faintly, waiting for the blood moon, and though she had chosen to return to him, the chains of fate were tightening. The days that followed were a storm tightening its noose. Whispers slithered through the packs like wildfire. The elders had declared war. Rival alphas who had once fought each other to the bone now stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the council's banner. Old blood feuds were set aside, grudges buried beneath a single oath, to tear down Aedric Valor, the fallen alpha king who refused to die. And in the center of that storm, Serenya stood. She watched the world unravel around their camp, watched scouts return with blood on their fur and horror in their eyes, watched maps sprawl across stone tables marked with enemy movements, watched Adric's loyal wolves dwindle to a handful who still believed their king had the strength to rise. He was weaker now, though he would never admit it. Every wound from silver festered beneath his skin. Every movement carried the weight of agony he buried beneath sheer will. At night, when he thought she was asleep, she saw him crouched by the fire, hands pressed to his ribs, jaw clenched as he fought to steady his breath. But when dawn came, he rose like iron forged in flame, his voice thunderous, his command unshaken. "They think me broken," he told them one morning, his voice carrying over the ragged circle of his followers. His silver eyes burned as fiercely as the fire at his back. "They think chains or wounds can silence me, but I will not kneel, not for the elders, not for traitors, not for destiny. Wolves bow only to strength, and we will show them ours." The circle erupted in growls and howls, their loyalty rekindled by the force of his fury. Yet Serenya felt the tremor beneath it, the fear they tried to bury, the knowledge that their numbers were too few, their enemies too many. That night, while the camp slept, Serenya stood apart. The blade the elders had pressed into her palm still lay hidden, wrapped in cloth and buried beneath her cloak. But she felt it even here, humming faintly, calling to her beneath the glow of the rising moon. "Kill him, and wolves will be free. Refuse, and all will burn." The elder's words would not leave her. She closed her eyes, and her mother's voice whispered from memory, "The blood moon will demand its price." Her heart ached, because the price, she feared, was him. The first strike of war came at dawn. It began with the ground trembling beneath the march of hundreds. Wolves shifted in unison, their howls splitting the morning sky. Rival alphas led their armies through the trees, banners of the council fluttering above them, silver weapons gleaming in the pale light. Adric's scouts returned bloodied, panting. "They are here, thousands." The camp erupted in chaos. Wolves scrambled to armor themselves to take up what weapons they had, but they were a fraction of their enemy's strength. Fear bled into the air. Adric stood at the center, unflinching, his eyes cut across the faces of those who remained, his voice thundering above the panic. "We are wolves, not sheep. Let them come. Let them think us weak. Tonight the ground drinks their blood. A roar answered him, ragged but fierce. His wolves rallied, circling him, ready to die at his side. Serenya felt the world tilt. She saw him, standing tall despite his wounds, fury etched into every line of him. He was magnificent, terrifying, unstoppable, even broken. He commanded the world to kneel. But her heart clenched with dread. Because she knew what he did not. The elders wanted this war. They wanted her choice sharpened by it. And when the blood moon rose, the blade would burn in her hands, demanding an answer. The battle erupted like thunder. The first wave of the council's wolves surged from the tree line, snarling, silver blades flashing. Adric's loyalists met them head-on, steel and claw colliding in a storm of blood. The air filled with the stench of iron, the cries of the dying, the roar of warriors who knew they fought a war they could not win. Serenya fought too. Though she had never been trained, the crest beneath her skin blazed when danger struck. When an enemy lunged, she felt the strike before it came. When silver flashed, her hands moved as if guided by something beyond herself. She felled wolves twice her size, her body moving with a rhythm that was not hers, but ancient, the queen's crest awakening. Still, the tide was merciless. For every foe that fell, 3 more rose. The loyalists bled into the dirt, their numbers dwindling beneath the endless wave. Through it all, Aedric was a storm. His claws tore through warriors, his roars shook the battlefield. He moved like death incarnate, every strike fueled by defiance. Blood poured from his wounds, silver glowed in his flesh, but he did not falter, not once. Serenya found herself at his side, fighting as one with him. He shielded her when she stumbled. She struck down those who lunged at his blind side. Their bond burned between them, undeniable, unbreakable. For a moment, it felt like destiny was not a chain but a weapon in their hands. But destiny was cruel. The war horns blared from the council's ranks. And through the smoke and blood, the rival alphas stepped forward. Kalen Dragor among them. His golden eyes locked on Serenya as he raised his blade. This ends tonight. The rival alphas surged as one, cutting through the chaos, their power immense. Wolves parted before them, knowing the true battle had begun. Aedric staggered, his body screaming its limits, but his roar was thunder itself. Then come. Serenya's heart twisted. She saw Kalen's gaze flicker between her and Aedric, calculating, cruel. She saw the council's banners burning overhead. She saw the blood moon beginning to climb, faint but swelling, red staining the horizon. And she knew. The hour of choice was nearly upon her. Would she stand at Aedric's side, lead beside him into a war that could tear the world apart? Or would she betray him, strike with the blade the elders had given her, and end the bloodline they swore cursed them all? Her hand burned where the hidden weapon pressed against her thigh. The battlefield roared around her, but the loudest sound was the hammering of her own heart. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. The moon hung blood-red above the shattered valley, its glow stretching over thousands of wolves locked in a frenzy of steel, claw, and fang. The banners of rival packs bled into the dirt, ripped down and trampled. The Elder Council's army pressed forward like a tide of shadows, their war cries echoing in the night. Against them, Aedric's forces stood in defiance, fewer in number but blazing with the ferocity of wolves who would rather die than kneel. Serenya stood at the heart of it all, torn between terror and something greater, something ancient stirring within her veins. The bond with Aedric throbbed in her chest, hot and unrelenting, but so too did the whisper of the prophecy that had been branded into her mind. The Omega who is not Omega will decide the fate of Alphas. Aedric fought at the front, silver-edged blades glinting in his fists. Blood streaked across his jaw, sweat dripping down his temples, but his presence radiated dominance so fierce, even the enemy hesitated before clashing with him. Every swing of his sword was destruction, every snarl a command of the wolves who fought at his side. But Serenya saw what the others did not. His wounds from the earlier battles had not healed fully. The silver still poisoned him, slowing his movements, making every breath heavier than the last. And Kalen Dragor, rival alpha, snake-hearted opportunist, circled like a predator waiting for the right moment. His golden eyes tracked Adric's every move, and his lips curled into a grin that promised betrayal was already at hand. Tonight, Kalen had sworn to the council, the Alpha King falls, and the Omega girl will belong to me. But Serenya was no longer certain what belonging meant. A scream tore through the air. One of Adric's wolves collapsed, silver arrows protruding from his chest. The line faltered. Enemy wolves surged forward, howling, the valley trembling beneath their charge. Serenya's hands clenched at her sides, useless, trembling. She was no warrior, no alpha general, she was an Omega. And yet, the mark burned. It began faintly, like the flicker of a candle behind her ribcage. Then it spread, surging across her skin in molten streams of light. Her breath hitched as fire seared her veins. She staggered forward, clutching her chest, gasping as the sigil, the forbidden crest, ignited once more. Adric turned just in time to see her collapse to her knees, the glow spilling across her throat, her arms, her very face. No. His voice cracked. He cut down an opponent and sprinted toward her. Serenya, not now. Hold it back. But she couldn't. The mark exploded outward in a blinding flare. Wolves on both sides cried out, shielding their eyes. The air itself rippled, charged with power so old it seemed to make the stones of the valley groan. A howl rose. Not hers, not Aedric's, but something deeper, ancient, and sovereign. Every wolf froze. Even Kalen's lips parted in shock. The light took form, spiraling around Serenya until she was no longer just a girl on her knees, but a figure of dread and reverence. Her hair whipped in the windless night, her eyes burned like molten gold, and the crest blazed so fiercely across her skin it was no longer a mark, but a crown. The wolves began to kneel, not to Aedric, to her. Whimpers filled the valley, the instincts of every alpha bowing to something greater. Even those who had sworn to kill her felt their throats tighten as an invisible hand pressed them down. Claws dug into dirt as the fiercest alphas trembled before the truth their blood remembered. The Alpha Queen had risen. Serenya's voice, when it came, was not her own. It thundered, layered with echoes of those who came before her. I am not Omega. Her words rolled like judgment, silencing the battlefield. I am Serenya of the first bloodline. I am the Queen of Wolves. Adric froze, sword still dripping red, staring at her as though he had been struck. He had suspected, he had feared, but to see it unfold before him was something even he could not have imagined. Kalen's shock turned swiftly to fury. No, he bellowed. His claws tore through the air as he lunged at her, desperate to strike before her power solidified. There will be no queen. No one commands me. But before his hand could touch her, the crest flared. Kalen screamed as his body convulsed mid-air, his wolf forced into submission. His knees hit the dirt, his forehead bowing against his will. His pride shattered, his howl of rage twisted into a whimper of humiliation. The rival wolves who had followed him fell silent, their loyalty faltering as they saw their alpha brought to his knees by a girl they had called Omega. Adric finally reached her side, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on hers. He should have been furious, threatened, enraged by her claim. But instead, he felt a pull deeper than the bond. For the first time in his life, the Alpha King bowed, not in body, but in acknowledgement. You, his voice was low, ragged. You are more than prophecy. Serenya's eyes flicked to him, molten and fierce, but within them glimmered the same girl who had spent her last coins to save him in a filthy auction hall. And you, she whispered back, are bound to me, whether fate wills it or not. The armies around them wavered, uncertain. The Elder Council's forces hissed, some retreating, others rallying with renewed fear. But the balance had shifted. Every alpha alive had seen what Serenya was, Not prey, not outcast, but queen. And in the silence that followed, one truth became clear. The war was no longer about Aedric alone. It was about her, the Alpha Queen who had awakened under the blood moon. The valley fell into silence, but it was not peace. It was the silence before a storm too vast to contain. The blood moon swelled above, red and swollen like a wound in the sky, its glow pouring across Serenya's crest until it burned brighter than fire. Wolves crouched in awe, torn between fear and reverence. Even the earth itself seemed to hum beneath their paws, an ancient rhythm calling for blood. The prophecy whispered on every breath. The Omega who is not Omega will decide the fate of Alphas. And fate, it seemed, demanded its price tonight. Serenya stood at the center of the battlefield, her body no longer her own. Her arm lifted, trembling yet unstoppable, her palm blazing with that same molten fire. Every wolf, every rival alpha, every council guard knew where it was aimed. At Aedric, the Alpha King, the mate bound to her blood, the man she had saved, the one who had vowed to protect her with his last breath. Gasps tore through the valley as wolves scrambled back. Even Kalen, still on his knees, lifted his head, eyes wide with a sick mixture of shock and triumph. "Do it," he croaked, voice hoarse. "The prophecy is absolute. Kill him, and the crown is yours." Aedric's sword slipped from his hand, the blade embedding in the dirt at his feet. He did not raise his defenses, nor did he command her to stop. His silver eyes burned, not with fear, but with defiance. "If fate wants me dead," he said, voice cutting through the night, "then let fate take me. But if it's you—" His chest heaved. "Then no, I will not fight you, Serenya." Her throat closed, every breath tearing like glass. The weight of the prophecy crushed her shoulders. She could feel the elders watching from the ridges above, their cloaked silhouettes sharp against the blood moonlight. They had orchestrated this moment, every manipulation, every lie, to lead her here, to be the weapon that killed the Alpha King and ended his bloodline forever. Her hand trembled. The fire gathered, brighter, hotter. The world held its breath. And then, she turned. Her outstretched palm snapped away from Aedric, swinging toward the cliffs where the elders stood. The fire burst outward like a wave, molten gold and blood red, slamming into the council's ranks. The sky cracked with thunder, the ground split, and screams filled the night as elders burned beneath her wrath. The battlefield erupted. Wolves who had bowed in silence now howled in shock. The elders, those untouchable eternal arbiters of wolf law, were collapsing, their robes aflame, their power unraveling in streams of ash. One by one they fell, shrieking prophecies that died on their tongues. "You were supposed to kill him," one screeched as she writhed in fire. "The blood moon." Serenya's voice rose above them, thunderous and absolute. "I am not your weapon. I am not your prophecy. I am your end." The final elder clawed at the sky, but Serenya's power tore through him, stripping the life from his ancient bones until only dust remained. And with his fall, the chain of fate shattered. The whispers of prophecy that had haunted wolves for generations dissipated into nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Serenya swayed, her crest dimming, her arm dropping limply to her side. The glow of the blood moon no longer compelled her. It had demanded a price, and she had chosen whom to give it to. She turned slowly, her eyes searching the battlefield until they found him. Aedric. He had not moved. His silver gaze never left her, though the weight in them had shifted, no longer kingly restraint but something raw, unguarded, relief, awe, fear even, though not of her, of losing her. "You defied it," he said, voice rough. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "I chose." The words rippled through the valley. "I chose, not fate, not the elders, not prophecy, her." The wolves around them shifted uneasily, some snarling, some kneeling lower. For centuries, They had lived under the Elder's rule, shackled by prophecy. Now, in one night, the prophecy had been broken. What would wolves become without it? A howl rose, a broken, desperate sound. Kaelin, still bound by her crest, slammed his fists into the dirt. "You damned us all," he spat. "Without prophecy, there will be only chaos. Alphas tearing each other apart for the throne. You've doomed the packs." Serenya's gaze cut to him, fire still glowing faintly at her fingertips. "No, the doom was theirs," she said, nodding to the ashes of the elders. "I've only given wolves the chance to choose for themselves." Kaelin bared his teeth, but he dared not rise, not under her gaze. Adric finally stepped forward. Blood dripped from his side, his steps uneven, but his presence filled the valley nonetheless. He stopped before her, reaching out with a hand that shook, not from fear, but exhaustion. "You've changed everything," he murmured. Her fingers slid into his, grounding her even as the last tremors of power shuddered through her bones. She met his eyes, her voice breaking. "Then stand with me, whatever comes." For a moment there was no battlefield, no prophecy, no crown. Only them, bound by blood, fire, and choice. And above them, the blood moon dimmed, its light fading into shadow as though even the heavens acknowledged that the prophecy's reign had ended. The price had been paid, and the world of wolves would never be the same again. The battlefield was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard of kings. The ash of the elders drifted across the valley like snow, coating broken banners, shattered blades, and blood-soaked soil. Wolves stood scattered in the wreckage, the howls and cries of war silenced into a stunned hush. The blood moon, once swollen with cruel prophecy, had waned to a pale crimson smear, its power spent. And there, at the heart of the ruin, stood Serenya. The crest still burned faintly on her skin, though softer now, pulsing like an ember instead of a wildfire. She swayed, exhaustion threatening to drag her down, but she did not fall. The eyes of every wolf in the valley were fixed on her, not Adric, not Kaelin, not the fallen elders. Her. For centuries, wolves had feared prophecies. Tonight, they had witnessed one shatter beneath her hand. Serenya inhaled, the taste of smoke and iron burning her throat. She looked over the valley at the kneeling alphas, the broken armies, the silence of wolves who had lived and died believing the elder's word was law. She had not asked for their gaze, their awe, or their submission. Yet here it was, undeniable, unrelenting. She was crowned not by hands, not by wolves, but by fate itself. Adric moved through the wreckage toward her. His steps were uneven, blood staining the torn fabric of his tunic, but nothing dimmed the gravity of his presence. Wolves parted before him instinctively, though their eyes lingered on Serenya, as if she alone anchored the sky above them. When he finally reached her, he did not speak. For a moment, the Alpha King simply stood before the girl who had undone prophecy, undone fate, undone him. And then, he knelt. Gasps rippled across the battlefield. The sound was louder than the clash of swords had ever been. The Alpha King of Dravenholt, the feared conqueror, the scourge of rival packs, bent his knee in the ashes, not as a king surrendering, but as a mate who finally saw her for what she was. Adric's head bowed low, his silver eyes glinting as he lifted them to her with reverence that had no trace of weakness. His voice carried, hoarse but steady, echoing through the hollow silence. "You didn't just save me, Serenya." His hand pressed to his chest, over the place where the bond thrummed between them. "You saved us all." The words trembled across the valley, carried on the night wind. Wolves shifted, some kneeling beside him, others bowing their heads in unison, as if the weight of those words demanded it. Even Kaelin, broken and furious, could not raise himself higher than the dirt. The bond of the bloodline, the crest, and the choice Serenya had made pressed every wolf beneath her shadow. Serenya's throat closed. She had thought herself small, weak, cursed, an omega with no place in the brutal order of alphas. Yet now the world knelt. And not because she had sought power, not because she had hungered for thrones, because she had chosen differently. Her gaze swept the battlefield one final time. Broken swords, torn banners, the ashes of the elders, the kneeling wolves. The old order had died here tonight. Thrones built on prophecy, on fear, on blood. What came after was unknown. Chaos, perhaps. Freedom, perhaps. But it would be chosen, not commanded by voices cloaked in shadows. Her legs trembled, but she stood taller, her chin rising, the crest glowing faintly, like a crown only she could wear. For the first time in her life, Serenya was not running, not hiding, not kneeling. She was standing where no Omega had ever stood, where no queen had stood in centuries. The night wind howled through the valley, carrying away the ash. The thrones of wolves had shattered, and in their ruin, a queen was born.
Thank you, untamed hearts, for staying till the end. The story pauses, but the fire never dies. Here in Tales by Jenny Moon, the hunt only waits for the next night. If you survive this chapter, step deeper. Share your presence with the pack so it knows who dares to return. Now that the journey has ended, what's your final thought on this story? Share it in the comments. I'm curious how it made you feel. The night never sleeps, and neither do the things within it. Rest if you must. Keep the moon close. And if you feel eyes on you, or a whisper at your door, don't panic. It's only a story, until the moon finds you.